My father was renowned in our circle for being devoted to my mother, a love bordering on obsession. It was because my mother nearly died from a postpartum hemorrhage during my birth. As a result, my father sent me, at 5 years old, to live with a nanny in the countryside. I stayed there until 3 years ago when my twin brother, Nathan, ran out on his wedding. To preserve the business alliance between our two families, my parents brought me back overnight. The night before the wedding, my mother warned me with ice in her voice. Chloe Sterling is in love with some charity case her family sponsors. Your life with her won't be easy, but all you have to do is keep your head down and survive for 3 years under your brother's name. Married life was even harder than I had imagined. Chloe's study was filled with photos of Julian Vance, and every week, she would fly to Paris to see him in secret. As for me, her husband, I wasn't even allowed in the master bedroom. I slept in the guest room at the far end of the hall. I was careful and discreet, doing my best to play the part of Nathan Miller. To ensure the family partnership remained intact, I treated Chloe with an almost insane devotion for those 3 years. When she worked late, I'd leave the entryway light on all night for her. Because of her sensitive stomach, I woke up at 5 every morning to make her a special porridge. She liked quiet, so I became the quietest presence in the house. Gradually, rumors began to circulate in our social circle that Nathan Miller was desperately in love with Chloe Sterling, and the way Chloe looked at me seemed to change subtly. The photos of Julian Vance disappeared from her study, and the weekly trips to Paris stopped. She started remembering my birthday, coming home early when I was sick. We even became intimate. I almost believed that real feelings had blossomed from this sham marriage. That was until 3 months ago when I received the good news. I could finally leave her. An icy voice came through the phone. Your brother will be back in a month. For this last month, you will continue to play the part of her husband. When it's all over, I'll give you $30 million to go live whatever life you want. I replied softly, I understand. But then Julian Vance returned, and everything snapped back to how it was. Chloe's heart was once again his, and she began staying out all night. Her study was once again filled with his photographs. Everyone mocked me, calling me a joke, but I just smiled quietly, never making a scene, because I had never been in love with Chloe. I only stayed by her side for the money and freedom my parents had promised. If she loved me, my life would certainly be easier, but if she didn't, it made no difference to me. After all, in just 1 month, I would receive my $30 million for 3 years of playing Nathan Miller. I could leave the city and finally live a life of my own. Just as I was feeling a sense of cheerful anticipation, my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with an incoming call. Chloe. I took a deep breath and answered. Chloe's voice was like ice. Bring some protection to the Onyx Lounge. You have 20 minutes. She hung up without another word. Clutching the phone, I knew instantly who they were for. A torrential downpour raged outside. The drive from the Sterling estate to the Onyx Lounge would normally take at least 40 minutes. Still, I grabbed an umbrella and left. Halfway there, my car was stuck in gridlock. I checked my watch. 12 minutes left. Gritting my teeth, I threw open the car door and ran into the storm. At the door to their private room, just as I was about to knock, I heard a wave of laughter from within. Chloe, someone said, you really made Nathan bring that stuff in this downpour? It's at least a 40-minute drive from your place. Chloe's voice was nonchalant. He'll find a way. That's true. Everyone knows how madly in love he is with you. For 3 years, he's been by your side without a single complaint, even knowing your heart was with someone else. Someone else chimed in, but Chloe, a handsome guy that devoted to you, you haven't felt a single thing for him in 3 years? The room suddenly went quiet. I held my breath. After a few seconds of silence, I heard Chloe say, between Julian and him, I will always choose Julian. The words were utterly ruthless, yet I didn't feel hurt. In fact, I felt a sense of relief. When I pushed the door open, everyone stared at me in shock. Right on time. Nathan, why are you so drenched? Chloe stood up, her brow furrowed. Why do you look such a mess? I handed her the package, which I had kept perfectly dry. You said 20 minutes, didn't you? I was worried you were in a rush, so I got out of the car and ran the rest of the way. I didn't mention the fall I'd taken, or the fact that my knee was throbbing so badly it was shaking. A flicker of something crossed Chloe's eyes. She pointed to the package in my hand. Just leave it there. I nodded and set it on the table. Back home, I took a hot shower, the cut on my knee stinging with a dull ache. Lying in bed, the thought of my imminent freedom brought an indescribable sense of relief. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, my bedroom door was kicked open. Chloe stormed in and grabbed my wrist. Get up! Before I could even react, she was dragging me, stumbling, to the top of the staircase. Chloe, what are you doing? Before I could finish the sentence, a powerful force shoved me from behind, and my body pitched backward. I lay at the bottom of the stairs, my vision blurred, a warm liquid trickling down from my forehead. I struggled to push myself up. Why would you do this to me? Chloe stood at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the light, her expression unreadable. Her voice, however, was bone-chilling. Was it you who pushed Julian? I looked up, bewildered. What? She descended the stairs one step at a time. Stop pretending. All those months of playing the magnanimous husband, you were just waiting for this moment, weren't you? Do you have any idea what you've done? You pushed Julian from a window ledge. He has multiple fractures. He almost died. I shook my head weakly. I didn't do it. Nathan, has my kindness these past few years given you the wrong idea? Let me make it clear one more time. This is a marriage of convenience. There are no feelings between us. She leaned close to my ear, enunciating every word. The love you want is something I can never, ever give you. The pain was so intense my vision started to black out, and I suddenly wanted to laugh. I never wanted her love in the first place. Just as I was about to speak, Chloe's voice cut in, colder than ever. Stop the act. Julian fell 5 stories. You just rolled down a flight of stairs. Get up. You're going to the hospital to apologize to him. She dragged me mercilessly towards the door. The gash on my knee split open again, sending a searing pain through my leg with every step. In the hospital room, Julian Vance was propped weakly against the headboard, his face pale, a bandage wrapped around his wrist. The moment he saw me, he flinched like a startled deer, his voice trembling. Chloe, I don't want to see him. Chloe immediately rushed to his side, taking his hand gently. Don't be afraid. I'm here. No one is going to hurt you. Then, she turned to me, her gaze frigid. What are you standing there for? Apologize. I was exhausted, but my voice was steady. I looked directly at Julian Vance and asked quietly, Mr. Vance, are you certain it was me who pushed you from that window? Julian's eyelashes fluttered as he put on a wounded expression. If Mr. Miller doesn't want to apologize, that's fine. I never intended to cause any trouble. His voice was thick with false injury. I know Chloe has been spending all her time with me, so it's natural for you to be resentful. But your marriage was arranged. She doesn't love you. If our families had been a match, she would never have been yours. His voice trailed off as Chloe's expression grew colder and colder. She cut him off sharply. Nathan, I brought you here to apologize, not to agitate him. Are you going to do it or not? I closed my eyes. I knew Julian was framing me, but I was so close to being free. I couldn't jeopardize the family partnership, or I'd lose both the $30 million and my freedom. I said quietly, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I turned to leave, but Chloe's cold voice stopped me. Stay. Since you're the one who pushed him, you will stay here and take care of him until he's discharged. My fingers clenched into a fist, but in the end, I simply nodded. For the next few days, I never left Julian's hospital room. Chloe practically moved in as well, neglecting all her work at the company to personally feed Julian, wash his hands, and lull him to sleep. The nurses whispered among themselves in the hallway. I've never seen a husband be so tolerant. Another nurse sighed. You don't get it. This is what true love looks like. He loves Chloe so much that he's willing to care for her first love, just on the off chance she might spare him a glance. It's so tragic. Chloe happened to be walking by and overheard them. She paused, her gaze drifting involuntarily to the tall figure inside the room. I was sitting with my head bowed, carefully peeling an apple. A strange, unfamiliar feeling stirred within her. The day Julian was discharged, Chloe told me directly, I'm taking Julian on a trip for a few days. Don't contact me unless it's an emergency. I nodded, watching her and Julian walk away. A sense of relief washed over me. Finally, I wouldn't have to see either of them. A week later, it was time for the Sterling family's monthly dinner. With Chloe away, I had to attend by myself. The moment Chloe's mother saw me, her expression soured. Where is Chloe? I lowered my gaze and explained. She was busy and couldn't make it back in time. Her mother sneered. Just as she was about to speak, the butler hurried over and handed her a tabloid. The front page was a photo of Chloe and Julian Vance kissing on a yacht. Chloe's mother slammed her utensils on the table, her voice shaking with rage. Nathan, in my study now. The moment we were in the study, she snapped, You're useless. You can't even control your own wife. You have 2 choices. Call her and get her back here right now, or you will face the consequences. My eyelashes trembled. I knew that even if I called, Chloe wouldn't return, and I couldn't risk interrupting her time with her first love. If I angered her, the entire business alliance could be at risk. I said quietly, "I'll accept the punishment." Her mother was livid. "Say that again." I lifted my head, my eyes calm. "I'll accept the punishment. Go ahead." Her face was a mask of fury. She snatched a riding crop from the wall and brought it down hard across my back. The pain was so blinding that my vision went black, and I fainted. When I woke up, I was lying on my stomach in a hospital bed, my back wrapped in bandages. Chloe was sitting in a chair beside me, her brow deeply furrowed. She asked in a low voice, "Why didn't you call me when my mother was giving you trouble?" I managed a weak smile. "I didn't want to interrupt your trip with Mr. Vance." Chloe froze, staring at my pale face. She suddenly recalled the nurse's words. "He loves Chloe so much that he's willing to care for her first love." That strange feeling inside her intensified. For the next few days, she did something unheard of. She stayed at the hospital to take care of me. I told her it wasn't necessary, but she remained. On the day I was discharged, Chloe got a call about an urgent meeting at the office. "You can get home on your own," she said, before turning and walking away. I nodded and slowly made my way out of the hospital. Just as I reached the bottom of the steps, I accidentally bumped into someone. The man exploded in anger. "Are you blind? Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? Dressed like that, there's no way you could afford to replace it." I was about to apologize when a sharp voice cut through the air from behind me. "Get out of his way." Chloe had gotten out of her car. She threw a thick wad of cash at the man's face. "Is that enough?" The man looked ready to argue, but one look at Chloe's expensive clothes and commanding presence sent him scurrying away. Chloe shot me a cold look. Just then, a trembling voice called out, "Chloe!" I looked up to see Julian Vance standing nearby. His eyes were red as he stared at us in disbelief. "Didn't you say you had a meeting?" The color drained from Chloe's face. Julian's voice was full of hurt. "You don't have to love me, Chloe, but why did you have to lie? I shouldn't have come back. I'm interrupting." With that, he turned and ran. Chloe immediately ran after him. I stood where I was, watching her go, feeling nothing but a calm emptiness. But a second later, there was a tremendous crash. A large pane of glass from high up on the shopping center's facade shattered, raining down directly on Julian's head. He collapsed in a pool of blood without a sound. Chloe's face went white. She scooped up the unconscious Julian and ran towards the hospital without a backward glance. I remained standing there, my fists clenching, but finally, I followed them. Under the stark, white lights of the hospital corridor, the in-surgery light remained lit. Chloe stood outside the door, her usually composed face showing a rare flicker of anxiety. I sat quietly on a nearby bench, saying nothing. The operating room door swung open and a doctor rushed out. "The patient is hemorrhaging and he's O-negative. The blood bank is running critically low." Chloe's brow tightened. Before she could speak, I was already on my feet. "I'm O-negative. I can give him blood." Chloe whipped her head around to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. I met her gaze calmly. "Saving his life is what's important right now." I followed the nurse to the donation room. As the 400 cubic centimeters bag slowly filled, my face grew paler, but my expression remained calm. Chloe stood nearby, watching the needle in my arm, and that strange, unidentifiable feeling grew stronger within her. She was probably wondering just how much I must love her to do this. After they finished drawing my blood, I walked out, pressing a cotton ball to my arm. Chloe was still standing vigil outside the operating room. I hesitated for a moment before walking over to her. "He's going to be okay," I said quietly. She looked up at me, her voice hoarse. "You're still here." I shook my head. "Mr. Vance has the wrong idea about us. I need to explain things to him when he wakes up." Chloe stared at my pale face and suddenly asked, "Do you really love me that much?" I was taken aback. Just as I was about to answer, the door to the operating room opened. The doctor came out. "The surgery was a success. The patient will wake up once the anesthesia wears off." The tension finally left Chloe's shoulders. I quietly stepped back, saying nothing more. The moment he opened his eyes and saw me standing by his bed, his face went pale. "Chloe, did you bring him here so I can give you my blessing?" I quickly stepped forward and explained quietly, "Mr. Vance, you've misunderstood. Chloe really did have a meeting that day. She was just dropping me off to buy some clothes on her way. It wasn't a date. She didn't lie to you." Chloe nodded in agreement. "This is just an arranged marriage. There are no feelings between us." Julian insisted, "Then prove it." Prove you don't have a single shred of affection for him. Chloe frowned. What do you want me to do? Julian thought for a moment, then pointed out the window. Throw him in the frozen lake. Chloe's expression faltered. Julian's voice trembled. You're hesitating. You do have feelings for him. Chloe was silent for a few seconds. Finally, with a sigh, she turned and waved to her bodyguards. Throw him in the lake. My pupils contracted. I knew Chloe would do anything for Julian, but I never imagined she could be this cruel. But I couldn't fight back. I had to endure it. The bodyguards escorted me out. Chloe remained where she was, her expression unreadable. The water was so cold it felt like 1,000 knives stabbing my skin. The moment I was pushed in, the shock nearly made me suffocate. The bodyguards stood on the shore, watching me impassively. No one moved to help. As my consciousness faded, I saw a vision of myself as a child, abandoned in the countryside, shivering in the winter without a warm coat, huddled for warmth in the nanny's woodshed. No one has ever cared about me in my entire life. I don't know how much time passed before I was finally pulled from the water. In a daze, I felt someone gently wiping me down with a warm towel. I instinctively grabbed the hand and mumbled, just a little longer. Soon, I'll be able to leave. The next second, the hand gripped mine tightly. It was Chloe's voice, cold as ice. Leave what? I opened my eyes to find myself back at the Sterling estate. Chloe was sitting by my bed, her eyes dark as she stared at me. What were you just saying about leaving? My heart leaped into my throat. I played dumb, my voice hoarse. Leaving? I must be delirious from the fever. Just talking nonsense. She studied me for a long moment, then seemed to accept my explanation. She let go of my hand. Are you all right? You were in that lake for a long time. I gave a weak smile. If it earned you his forgiveness, then it was worth it. Her expression was complicated. She asked again, do you really love me that much? I lowered my eyes. It wasn't love. I just needed to maintain the alliance between our families. As soon as Nathan returned, I would be gone. The door suddenly opened, and Julian Vance walked in. Chloe, when are we leaving for our fishing trip? He noticed I was awake and feigned surprise. Oh, Mr. Miller, are you feeling better? Before I could answer, he added with a smile, I was just angry when I said that before. I never thought she'd actually throw you in the lake. I'm so sorry. I heard you're the one who donated blood for me. Why don't you come fishing with us? Consider it my way of making it up to you. I was about to refuse, but Julian clapped me on the shoulder. Don't say no. I've already cleared it with Chloe. Chloe shot me a look, a clear signal not to spoil the mood. I had no choice but to nod. On the luxury yacht, the sea breeze was tinged with salt. Julian stuck close to Chloe's side the entire time, smiling as she fed him pieces of fruit. I stood on the deck, watching the horizon, feeling completely detached from the scene. When Chloe stepped away to take a phone call, Julian finally approached me. You know, he began, sometimes I just don't get you. I turned to look at him. He narrowed his eyes. Everyone says you're so in love with Chloe that you do anything for her. But isn't love supposed to be possessive? I framed you and you apologized without a fight. She threw you into a frozen lake and you showed no anger. Even now, watching us together, you're completely blank. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Do you even love her at all? I gave a slight, humorless smile. He was right. I didn't love Chloe. Just then, a rogue wave slammed against the yacht, knocking us both off balance and into the sea. The cold water closed over my head. The sharp metal edge of the boat sliced a long gash into both our arms, and blood immediately began to cloud the water around us. Man overboard. We need help. The deck erupted into chaos. A crew member dove in after us, but he resurfaced quickly, his face grim. Miss Sterling, their blood will attract sharks, and they're drifting in opposite directions. To be safe, we can only go after one of them. The color drained from Chloe's face. Her eyes darted frantically across the water, from Julian, who was thrashing wildly, to me, as the current pulled me further and further away. She practically screamed the words, "Save Julian first." I heard her, just after swallowing another mouthful of salty water. I watched the rescuer swim towards Julian. I saw the panic on Chloe's face. A bitter smile touched my lips, and I slowly closed my eyes. I should have known. In her heart, I would always be the one she was willing to sacrifice. Water filled my lungs, and my consciousness began to fade. In the haze, I saw a dark shape approaching rapidly. A shark. A sharp, tearing pain shot through my leg. My last memory was of the clear blue water turning crimson. When I woke up again, I was staring at the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. The nurse let out a sigh of relief. you're finally awake. You were seriously injured. We need to contact your family. Look at Mr. Vance in the next room. He fell in the water too, but his injuries are much less severe, and Miss Sterling hasn't left his side. Where are your relatives? It's been 2 days and no one has come. I managed a weak, humorless smile and said nothing. Just then, the door to my room was thrown open. Chloe stood in the doorway, her face a thunderous mask, her eyes stabbing into me like daggers. The nurse froze, clearly confused as to why Chloe was here, but seeing the look on her face, she quickly excused herself. Her voice was glacial. Did you push Julian into the water? I stared at her, stunned. I couldn't understand why Julian would lie again. A profound weariness washed over me. I didn't. Still lying? Julian told me himself. I thought you were supposed to be so tolerant. Why the sudden change? She let out a cold laugh as if she'd figured it out. Or was all that patience just an act? A way to get my attention. The pain made my face go white, but I just looked at her calmly, too tired to even bother explaining. My calm gaze seemed to infuriate her. She violently shoved my chart onto the bedside table. Fine. If you won't admit what you did, then you can suffer the consequences. She turned to leave, her voice dropping to a frigid whisper. From this moment on, no doctors or nurses will attend to you. You can deal with the pain on your own. The next few days were a living hell. No doctors came on their rounds. No nurses changed my bandages. I fell several times trying to get around, but each time, I gritted my teeth and pulled myself back up. Chloe probably thought that a pampered heir like Nathan Miller wouldn't be able to handle such neglect. But she didn't know that I wasn't Nathan. I wasn't some rich kid raised in a bubble. I was Ethan Miller, the boy who grew up fending for himself in the countryside, abandoned by his parents. I learned to take care of myself when I was sick. This pain was nothing new. A few days later, just as I finished my discharge paperwork and was packing my bag, the door to my room was kicked open. Chloe stormed in, her face grim, and grabbed my wrist. You're coming with me. I frowned. To do what? Chloe's voice was tight with tension. Julian's been kidnapped by Jocelyn Ives. She's demanding an exchange. She wants you. She'll release you in 3 days. My heart skipped a beat. Jocelyn Ives, the notoriously unstable and obsessive woman from our circle. Every time she saw me, her cold, predatory eyes made my skin crawl. I refused immediately. I'm not going. Her eyes turned to ice. You don't have a choice. She stared at me, then her tone softened slightly. Jocelyn has a thing for you. She won't hurt you. Just do this, and afterwards, I'll give you anything you ask for. I looked up at her and, to my own surprise, smiled. All right, I want a wedding. Chloe was taken aback. What? I said quietly. We only ever signed the papers. We never had a ceremony. I want you to give me one. This was part of my plan. When Nathan returned, I needed a grand, public wedding for everyone to witness. Chloe was silent for a long moment before finally nodding. Fine, I agree. When I arrived at the Ives estate, Jocelyn greeted me with a wide smile. Nathan, it's been too long. Her fingertips traced the line of my jaw. I fought back a wave of revulsion and stood perfectly still. For the first 2 days, Jocelyn just had her men draw my blood, vial after vial. I grew numb to the prick of the needle, but watching my own blood fill those glass tubes made my heart pound with a primal fear. On the 3rd day, drifting in and out of consciousness, I overheard the guards whispering outside my door. Is she insane? Is she really going to drain all his blood to make some kind of specimen? Quiet down. She said he's too beautiful to live, that only as a preserved specimen can he be kept forever. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This was Chloe's promise that she won't hurt you? I was going to die here. A chilling fear shot up my spine. When the guards were distracted, I threw all my weight against the window, shattering it, and leaped from the 2nd-story balcony. I heard a sickening crack from my right ankle, and the pain was so intense my vision swam, but I didn't stop. I dragged my broken foot and ran, stumbling, all the way from the Ives estate back to the Sterling mansion. When I pushed open the front door, I saw Chloe, carefully applying ointment to Julian Vance's ankle. Julian was saying with feigned concern, Chloe, Nathan's been gone for 3 days. Aren't you worried about him at all? Chloe's hands paused. Her voice was impossibly gentle. I'm only worried about you. Why didn't you tell me you sprained your ankle? Are you trying to make me worry myself to death? I stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, my ankle swollen to twice its normal size, and neither of them even looked at me. I walked past them, my face a blank mask. Chloe finally noticed me and shot to her feet. Nathan, you? Her eyes scanned my body, as if checking for injuries. She seemed to relax slightly. What happened over the last 3 days? I gave a grim smile, my chapped lips cracking and bleeding. Nothing important. I cut straight to the point. When are you going to make good on your promise about the wedding? Julian's head snapped up. What wedding? Chloe hesitated for a second. We're going to have a proper wedding ceremony. Seeing Julian's eyes instantly well up, she quickly added, It's just a formality, Julian. You know you're the only one I love. Julian forced a smile. I understand. I'm not mad. You only did it to save me. He then turned to me, his voice soft. Mr. Miller, why don't I help you pick out your suit? For the next few days, Julian shadowed my every move during the suit fittings, insisting on inspecting every option and micromanaging every detail. I complied silently, like a puppet on a string. When the final suit was chosen, alone in the empty dressing room, Julian finally dropped his facade. So this was your plan all along, playing the long game. Let me tell you something. Don't think for a second this little stunt will win you, Chloe. She belongs to me. I didn't even look at him. I just calmly pulled my arm from the tailor's grasp. There's no game. I want out of this farce more than anyone. I just want it to be over. But I underestimated his paranoia. Julian was convinced I was trying to steal Chloe from him, and he started making trouble again. The night before the wedding, Chloe kicked my door open. Her face was dark. Did you switch Julian's medication? I closed my eyes, weary. No. She yanked me to my feet. Still lying? I guess you haven't learned your lesson. She had her bodyguards lock me in the dark, damp cellar. I sat in the corner in the pitch black, hugging my knees. The next day, Chloe opened the door, her face a cold mask. It was only one night. Did you have to make such a scene? After a full night of torment, my face was as white as a sheet. Julian let rats in here. Chloe scoffed and flipped on the light. What rats? I froze. The cellar was spotless. Not a single trace. Julian had already covered his tracks. I opened my mouth to speak, but closed it again. There was nothing to say. Chloe's voice was frigid. The wedding is in 3 days. I'll be spending that time with Julian. I'll see you at the ceremony. She shot me a warning glance. Don't cause any more trouble, or the wedding is off. With that, she turned and left the cellar. I listened to her footsteps fade away before slowly, painfully, pulling myself to my feet. For the next 3 days, I didn't leave my room. I barely touched the food the staff brought me. No matter how beautiful the day was, I couldn't risk giving Julian another opportunity to frame me. True to her word, Chloe spent all 3 days with Julian and never once came back to the house. The day before the wedding, I pulled a pre-packed suitcase from the depths of my closet. I took one last look around the room that had been my prison for 3 years, and then I walked out without a backward glance. My mother was waiting for me in the airport terminal. She handed me a debit card and a plane ticket. $30 million. Not a penny less. From this day forward, you are no longer a part of the Miller family. I took the card, my fingertips trembling slightly. I looked up at my mother, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. I said quietly, "Thank you." Her tone was frigid. You played your part well for 3 years. You didn't jeopardize the partnership. She paused. Go live the life you want. I nodded and turned towards the security checkpoint. At the corner, I glanced back one last time. She was already gone, her retreating back so final it was as if I had never been her son at all. But I wasn't sad. I clutched the plane ticket, my eyes burning. This time, finally, I could live for myself. I walked toward my gate without looking back, my posture resolute. Meanwhile, back at the Sterling estate, a man who looked almost identical to me, Nathan, was putting on his tuxedo, calmly awaiting the next day's wedding. The man in the mirror was handsome and poised, almost unchanged from the man who had fled his wedding 3 years prior, except now his eyes held a colder, more arrogant glint. He adjusted his tie, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. Outside, Julian Vance watched Nathan's back through a crack in the door. His eyes narrowed, just as he'd suspected. I wasn't magnanimous at all, just playing a long, manipulative game to win Chloe's heart. So calculating. What infuriated him even more was that Chloe had actually agreed to the ceremony. Even if it was just for show, it was enough to drive him insane with jealousy. Julian whispered to himself, a vicious light in his eyes. Nathan Miller, you think this is some kind of victory? Dream on. He turned and walked away, his expensive shoes silent on the thick carpet. A few moments later, Chloe entered. She was wearing a stunning white gown, but her beautiful face was etched with impatience. She glanced at Nathan. I will go through with this wedding today, she said coolly, but I expect you to stop harassing Julian from now on. Nathan looked up, his eyes meeting hers, his expression so calm it was almost cold. He didn't answer, just gave a slight nod. Chloe frowned. The man in front of her seemed different somehow, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Just as she was about to press the issue, her phone rang. It was her assistant, her voice frantic. "Ms. Sterling, it's an emergency. Mr. Vance is gone." The color drained from Chloe's face. Without a second thought, she turned and ran out of the room. At that same moment, I was in the airport lounge, checking my passport. My phone buzzed. It was a taunting iMessage from Julian Vance. "Even on your wedding day, Chloe will still choose me over you. So tell me, who's more important?" I read the message without expression, then ejected my SIM card and dropped it into a nearby trash can, as if discarding the last 3 years of submission and pretense. Back at the wedding venue, chaos reigned. Guests whispered amongst themselves. The officiant stood awkwardly at the altar, unsure how to announce that the ceremony was postponed. In the groom's suite, Nathan waited. Chloe never returned. He stood up, ready to go find out what was happening, when the door was thrown open. Chloe stood in the doorway, panting, her face a mask of fury. Her voice was hoarse with suppressed rage. "Nathan, something's happened to Julian. The wedding is off." Nathan watched her silently for a moment, then laughed. "Chloe, are you really going to call off our wedding for an outsider?" Chloe froze, then her voice turned to ice. "He is not an outsider, and if you hadn't been tormenting him, he wouldn't have run off in the first place." Nathan shook his head, his eyes full of something that looked like pity. "You poor, naive woman." His words enraged her. She was about to retort when her phone rang again. She looked at the caller ID, and all the color drained from her face. Chloe stood in the doorway, looking at Nathan with a sarcastic smile, her voice like ice. "I just told you to leave Julian alone, and you immediately have him kidnapped? Do you just live to torment him? And now you've staged this whole drama." Nathan looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Before he could argue, Chloe's bodyguards surged forward and roughly threw him to the floor. His knees slammed into the marble floor, and the sharp, agonizing pain made his face go white. "Chloe, how dare you do this to me?" Nathan stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Chloe looked down at him, her expression utterly cold. She waved a hand at her bodyguards. "Get him in the car." The bodyguards efficiently hauled Nathan to his feet, ignoring his struggles, and shoved him into the black sedan waiting outside. The moment the door closed, a cloth soaked in chloroform was pressed over his nose and mouth. Nathan's eyes widened in panic. He struggled for a few moments, and then lost consciousness. An unknown amount of time later, Nathan was jolted awake by a sharp pain. He found himself stuffed inside a rough burlap sack, his body curled into a ball, unable to move. A moment later, the sack was lifted and then thrown to the ground like a bag of trash. A sharp, cracking pain shot through his wrist. He cried out, but the sound was muffled by the duct tape over his mouth. He heard Chloe's voice from outside the sack, cold and distant. "I'm here for the exchange. Release Julian." A man's raspy voice laughed. "So the rumors are true. You really do love Mr. Vance. Since you don't care about this one, why don't you stab him? Let's see how ruthless you rich folks really are." Chloe was silent for a few seconds. "Isn't the money enough?" she asked coolly. The kidnapper scoffed. "Oh, we're not doing this for the money, Ms. Sterling." Just then, footsteps emerged from the shadows, accompanied by a slow, mocking clap. Jocelyn Ives strolled into the light, a playful smile on her face. "Chloe, it's been a while." Chloe's eyes went cold. "Jocelyn, I should have known it was you." Jocelyn shrugged, her tone breezy. "Your dear husband ruined my perfect little plan before. All I'm asking now is for you to stab him. That's not too much to ask, is it?" Chloe frowned. "What plan?" Jocelyn gave her a strange smile. "You don't know? I was going to." A shrill ringtone cut Jocelyn off. She glanced at the screen and answered on speakerphone. "Jocelyn, when are you getting here? We're all waiting for you." "I know." Jocelyn took a step back, shaking her head with mock regret. "You heard her, Miss Sterling. My friends are waiting, so you need to make a decision. Either you stab Nathan," she paused, her smile turning predatory, "or none of you are leaving here today." The air in the room grew thick. Chloe's gaze fell on the squirming burlap sack, a complex emotion flickering in her eyes. After a moment, she took the knife from Jocelyn's hand. She walked over to the sack and pressed the tip of the blade against the rough fabric. Nathan must have sensed the danger, because he began to struggle violently, his muffled cries trapped behind the tape. Chloe's hand trembled, but her expression quickly hardened into a cold mask. Without hesitation, She plunged the knife into the sack. Blood instantly bloomed on the burlap. Inside, Nathan's body went rigid and then fell slack. Jocelyn burst out laughing. "I knew you had it in you, Chloe." Her tone shifted, her eyes turning cold. "But you took too long. So now there's interest. You can either stab Julian once, or you can stab Nathan 3 more times." Chloe's face darkened. "Jocelyn, don't push it." Jocelyn was unfazed, leaning casually against the wall. "Make your choice, Chloe. My patience is wearing thin." Chloe's fists were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. Finally, she took a deep breath and drove the bloody knife into the sack again. Once, twice, 3 times. Chloe closed her eyes, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Nathan, I'm sorry." Much later, Nathan regained consciousness. A deep chill settled in his bones. He struggled to open his eyes, his vision blurry. The air in the sack was hot and foul, the metallic tang of blood so strong he nearly choked. Gritting his teeth, he used every last ounce of strength to fight his way out of the sack. The warehouse was empty. He was alone. Chloe was gone. Julian was gone. They had left him there. With a trembling hand, Nathan reached for his pocket, wanting to call his parents to come and get him. Chloe was a psychopath. So was Julian. He couldn't begin to imagine what his brother must have gone through all these years. But the moment he pulled out his phone, a figure lunged from the shadows and punched him squarely in the face. The phone flew from his hand and shattered against the wall. The blow snapped Nathan's head to the side, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He slowly looked up to see Julian Vance standing over him, a triumphant smirk on his face. Julian looked down at him, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Who were you going to call? Going to play the victim for someone else?" Nathan didn't say a word. He just slowly pushed himself up, leaning against the wall, panting. His silence only made Julian more arrogant. "What? Cat got your tongue. You see? I told you. Even on your wedding day, all it takes is one iMessage from me, and Chloe comes running." He lowered his voice, his words sharp and deliberate. "If you have any sense at all, you'll disappear and give me my rightful place as Chloe's husband." Nathan stared at him and then he smiled. Julian froze, and before he could react, Nathan shoved him, hard. Julian stumbled backward into a metal shelving unit, the sharp corner digging into his lower back. He cried out and crumpled to the floor. He stared up at Nathan in disbelief, his voice shaking. "You pushed me?" Nathan used the wall to pull himself to his feet. He was covered in his own blood. He let out a small, humorless laugh and, dragging his injured leg, began to walk towards Julian. "I pushed you. So what?" Julian panicked, scrambling backward away from him. "Stay away from me." Nathan ignored him. He bent down and picked up a short length of steel pipe, testing its weight in his hand. Julian's eyes widened in terror. This was not the same Nathan Miller he had been tormenting for years. "Help!" he shrieked, trying to crawl away, but Nathan grabbed his ankle and dragged him back. "Weren't you so arrogant a minute ago?" Nathan loomed over him, tapping the steel pipe against his cheek. "Are you scared now?" Julian was trembling, tears and snot streaming down his face, but he still tried to sound brave. "If you touch me, Chloe will never forgive you." Nathan sneered and brought the pipe down hard on Julian's leg. Julian's scream echoed through the empty warehouse. Nathan ignored it, bringing the pipe down again and again, his movements efficient and ruthless. The years he'd spent abroad had hardened him. He was no longer a man to be trifled with. He beat Julian until he was barely conscious, too weak to even beg for mercy, just a whimpering ball on the floor. Nathan stood over him, panting, and wiped the blood from his face. He raised the pipe for a final blow, but the warehouse doors were suddenly kicked open, flooding the space with blinding light. Chloe stood in the doorway, her face a thunderous mask as she stared at the scene before her. The moment he saw Chloe, a flicker of hope ignited in Julian's eyes. He dragged his battered body towards her, his voice a broken, trembling mess. "Chloe, he's trying to kill me. Nathan's gone insane. He can't stand to see me happy." Chloe caught him as he stumbled, her eyes, cold and furious, fixed on Nathan. Her voice was low and dangerous. "What is the meaning of this?" Nathan wiped the blood from his mouth and sneered, tossing the steel pipe aside. The clang of metal on concrete echoed in the empty warehouse. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "Chloe, I want you to think very carefully about who was in the wrong here today." He paused, his eyes as sharp as daggers. "And don't forget what you owe me for what happened here." Chloe's brow furrowed, her voice cold. "Weren't you in on this with Jocelyn?" Nathan let out a short, harsh laugh, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Fine. Then I'll go to the press right now. He stared directly into her eyes, his words slow and deliberate. I wonder how your family will handle that kind of scandal. If I recall, the Sterlings are trying to close that big real estate deal downtown, aren't they? He then turned to Julian. And I'm sure Mr. Vance wouldn't want to be trending on Twitter tomorrow as a homewrecker. Julian's face went pale, his lips trembling. Chloe, it's all my fault. Mr. Miller is just angry because we didn't finish the wedding. Chloe's frown deepened. She looked at Nathan. If that's what this is about, I can make it up to you. There's no need to take it out on Julian. Nathan scoffed, his eyes filled with derision. Don't waste your breath. He slowly pulled himself to his full height. Despite his injuries, his posture was proud. Who needs your pathetic wedding? Ceremony or not, I am still your husband. With that, he turned his back on them. Clutching his bleeding side, he began to walk out of the warehouse. As he passed them, he paused, his voice like shards of ice. We'll leave it at this for today. But don't worry, we have plenty of time. Then he walked out without a backward glance. Chloe stood frozen, watching his retreating figure. A strange, unfamiliar emotion pierced her heart. He was a bloody mess, stabbed by her own hand. He should have been furious, hysterical. But his calm, steady gaze had left her feeling breathless and unsettled. Chloe suddenly realized that she had never truly seen the real Nathan Miller. Julian was still whimpering beside her, but for the first time, his complaints grated on her nerves. A strange, new feeling began to stir deep inside her. Had Julian's presence turned him into this person? The thought made her breath catch in her throat. Julian sat on the sofa in the mansion while the family doctor carefully tended to his bruises. He hissed as the alcohol swab touched a cut, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the look in Nathan's eyes in that warehouse. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. It was the same face, but the eyes, the ruthless intensity, it was like he was a completely different person from the submissive man he had known before. He gripped the armrest of the sofa so tightly his knuckles turned white. The doctor quickly apologized. My apologies, Mr. Vance. Just a moment longer. Julian waved a hand impatiently, urging him to finish. After the doctor left, he stood up to get a glass of water. As he stepped into the hall, he overheard two maids whispering around the corner. One of them was holding an envelope. Mr. Miller said not to bring this out until after the wedding, but the wedding never happened. What should we do? Be quiet. If Miss Sterling finds out we didn't follow his instructions. Julian narrowed his eyes and approached them silently. What are you talking about? The two maids jumped. When they saw it was Julian, the color drained from their faces. Mr. Vance. Julian held out his hand. What is that? Let me see it. The maid hesitated, but handed it to him. Mr. Miller gave this to us. He said to give it to him after the wedding. But since the wedding didn't happen, we weren't sure what to do. A thought sparked in Julian's mind, but he kept his expression gentle. I see. Well, you can give it to me. I was just on my way to see him. As soon as the maids were gone, he hurried back to his room, locked the door, and tore open the envelope. Inside were several pages of neat, handwritten notes. Chloe is allergic to dairy. Remember to avoid it. She hates sweets. Coffee should be black, no sugar. Stomach medicine is in the second drawer on the left in the study. She forgets to take it when she works late. Julian's fingers trembled. The man he knew was already intimately familiar with Chloe's habits. Why would he need to write these things down? Julian's heart began to race. Unless the man currently in this house wasn't Nathan Miller at all. He shot to his feet, grabbed his phone, and dialed a number. I need you to run a background check on Nathan Miller. I want everything you can find, especially his movements over the last 3 months. After hanging up, he hid the notes in the false bottom of his watch box and took a deep breath to compose himself. He opened his door and came face to face with Nathan, who was just coming up the stairs. Their eyes met, and the air between them crackled with tension. Julian forced his racing heart to calm and squeezed out a smile. Mr. Miller, Chloe's in the study. Perhaps you'd like to take her up a glass of warm milk. He watched Nathan's face intently, searching for any flicker of a reaction. Nathan slowly raised an eyebrow. His gaze shifted from Julian's bruised face to the glass of milk in his hand. He let out a cold laugh, took the glass, and threw its contents directly in Julian's face. Julian yelped and staggered back, milk dripping from his hair. Are you insane? Nathan smashed the empty glass on the floor, sending shards of glass flying. He smirked, his eyes filled with contempt. That's a job for the staff. Who the hell do you think you are, trying to give me orders? Julian was shaking with rage. How dare you? Hearing the commotion, Chloe came out of her study, frowning at the scene. What is going on? Nathan stood with his hands in his pockets, a defiant look on his face. I did it. So what? He shot a look at Julian. At least I'm not a coward who resorts to petty, underhanded tricks. With that, he turned and walked away, his leather shoes crunching loudly on the broken glass. Julian looked at Chloe, his expression pitiful. Chloe, why is he being so cruel to me? Chloe was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on Nathan's retreating back. Then, she said something that shocked him. The wedding didn't go as planned. It's understandable that he's upset. It's not a big deal. Go and get yourself cleaned up. Julian stared at her as if she'd struck him, his face a mask of disbelief. Julian followed Chloe into her study, his voice thick with emotion. Chloe, if Nathan really hates me this much, maybe I never should have come back. Chloe rubbed her temples, her tone weary but gentle. Don't read too much into it. He's just in a bad mood. Julian pressed on. Why is he in a bad mood? Is it because I'm here? I know I never should have come between you two. Chloe poured herself a glass of whiskey and didn't answer. Seeing her silence, Julian's voice grew desperate. You don't love me anymore, do you? No one has ever truly loved me. If you abandon me too, then what's the point of living? As the words left his mouth, he shot to his feet and lunged toward the large balcony window. Chloe moved faster, grabbing his wrist. Her voice was tight with a barely controlled anger. Stop this nonsense. Then can't you at least punish him like you used to? The way he treated me today, it really hurt me. Chloe was silent for a moment, then finally, she nodded. Just as they reached Nathan's bedroom door, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. The butler hurried to the door, his face pale. Ms. Sterling, it's the police. Before he could finish, 3 uniformed police officers walked into the foyer. Nathan was already standing in the hallway, his voice chillingly calm. I'm the one who called them. The color drained from Chloe's face. Nathan, what are you doing? Nathan calmly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a series of ugly bruises on his arm. I'm pressing charges against Julian Vance for assault. He looked at the officers. Here's your evidence. Chloe grabbed his arm. Are you insane? He was just playing around. Nathan sneered and yanked his arm away. You have a very interesting definition of playing around. Julian's face was ashen. He stammered. I didn't mean to. I was just… Nathan cut him off. Apologize, or we can settle this in court. With the police officers watching, Julian had no choice but to clench his fists and bow his head in humiliation. I'm sorry. After the police left, Nathan went back into his room and closed the door without a backward glance. Chloe stood frozen in the hallway, her brow furrowed. Was it her imagination, or had Nathan become a complete stranger? Late that night, Chloe found herself knocking on Nathan's door. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, a glass of red wine in his hand. Yes? He asked languidly. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment. She softened her voice. What's been going on with you lately? Julian is just a guest. You're my husband. What more do you want? Nathan cut her off, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. He took a sip of his wine. Chloe, you're married to me, but you let him live here. Is it fun, playing these games with me? Chloe frowned. That's not what I meant. But the door was slammed shut in her face. Chloe stood in the hallway, her expression shifting. This Nathan was nothing like the man she knew. When had the obedient, submissive husband she'd married become so defiant? It was nearly noon when Julian finally got out of bed. He tossed and turned all night, his mind consumed by Chloe's strange behavior and the coldness in Nathan's eyes. He rubbed his temples and decided to get something to eat before trying to figure out his next move. But when he entered the dining room, there was only one place setting on the table. Nathan was calmly eating a piece of toast, a cup of black coffee at his elbow. Julian frowned. Where's my breakfast? Nathan didn't even look up. He finished his toast, then glanced at him lazily. If you want breakfast, go ask the cook. He wiped his mouth. I made this for myself. There's only one. Julian suppressed his anger. Then have her make it now. Nathan let out a small laugh, stood up, and walked right past him without a second glance. Julian clenched his fists in fury and stormed into the kitchen, only to find it empty except for a young maid washing dishes. He demanded, "Where's the cook?" The maid jumped at his tone and answered timidly, "She has the day off, sir." Then why did Nathan get to eat? The maid looked down, her voice barely a whisper. He made it himself, sir." Julian's face was livid. He slammed the kitchen door and stormed back to his room, his stomach growling. Just then, his phone rang. It was the private investigator. He answered immediately. The man on the other end spoke in a low voice. Mr. Vance, I found something, Julian said impatiently. Tell me. The night before the wedding, security cameras caught someone who looks identical to Nathan Miller leaving the Sterling estate. The investigator paused. I also found a record of a transaction 3 years ago between the Miller family and Nathan Miller. I don't have the details, but the memo mentions a substitute arrangement. Julian's pupils contracted, his fingers tightening on the phone. Do you have proof? I have photos and copies of the transaction records. Would you like to come and pick them up? Send me the address. I'm on my way. After hanging up, Julian slipped out of the mansion. Half an hour later, he met the private investigator in a secluded coffee shop. The man handed him a manila envelope. It's all in here, he said in a low voice. Surveillance photos, copies of the Miller family's financial records. Julian eagerly tore it open. After flipping through a few pages, a cold smile spread across his face. Just as he'd thought, the man in the house was an imposter. He paid the man the rest of his fee, stuffed the file into his bag, and headed back to the mansion. His mood significantly improved. Now, he would see just how long the imposter could keep up his arrogant act. But just as he reached the front door of the mansion, he ran into Nathan, who was on his way out. Their eyes met. This time, Julian didn't bother to hide his contempt. He lifted his chin, his voice dripping with condescension. Nathan Miller. Or should I be calling you by another name? Nathan stopped and looked at him, his eyes cold. Julian waved the file in his hand, a triumphant smile on his face. I know your secret. If you don't want Chloe to throw you out on the street, you'd better get on your knees and apologize to me right now. Nathan stared at him, his face blank, for a few seconds. Then he let out a short, humorless laugh. You're insane. He turned to leave. Julian, enraged by his dismissive attitude, lunged forward and grabbed his arm. Stop pretending. I'm telling you, I have enough evidence in here to. He didn't get to finish. Nathan violently shook him off. Caught off balance, Julian's feet slipped out from under him. He fell backward, grabbing onto Nathan's jacket in a panic, and pulled them both down the front steps. The sickening thud of their bodies hitting the pavement was punctuated by Julian's scream. They landed in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, the contents of the file scattering across the ground. When Chloe got the news, the color drained from her face. She and her assistant rushed to the hospital. As she hurried down the corridor, her mind raced, replaying all of his recent strange behavior, the coldness in his eyes, his defiant attitude, his open hostility towards her and Julian. The two men were in adjacent rooms. Chloe stood in the hallway between them, unsure which door to open first. As she hesitated, a nurse approached her, holding a manila envelope. Miss Sterling, we found this with Mr. Vance's belongings. Chloe took the envelope and opened it. Her pupils contracted. Inside were security camera stills and financial records. They clearly showed a man who looked identical to Nathan leaving her estate the night before the wedding. And, even more shocking, a 3-year-old financial transaction between the Miller family and Nathan, with the memo line, substitute compensation. This has to be fake, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Her hand tightened, crumpling the papers in her fist. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place. He wasn't Nathan. She looked up, her eyes blazing with fury, and turned to confront the man in the hospital room. But as she took her first step, she saw Julian Vance standing at the end of the hall, his face pale as he stared at the papers in her hand. He hurried over to her, his voice trembling with manufactured shock. Chloe, I knew there was something wrong with him. He's not Nathan Miller. He's an imposter. Chloe watched him, her eyes cold, not missing the flicker of panic in his. She pushed down her own confusion and asked, her voice low, why were you looking into this? Julian froze, then managed a weak smile. I was just worried about you. I didn't want you to be deceived. Chloe ignored him and pushed open the door to the hospital room. It was empty. A nurse told her that the Miller family had checked him out a short time ago. Chloe's expression darkened. She turned to her assistant. Verify these documents and have the car brought around. I'm going to the Miller estate. Julian quickly stepped in front of her, his voice urgent. Chloe, he ran away. That proves he's guilty. He was probably after the Sterling family fortune. Why are you still chasing him? Chloe looked at him, her expression unreadable. I just want to know where the real Nathan Miller is. Julian stiffened, the smile on his face faltering. Chloe, have you fallen in love with him? Chloe didn't answer. She just gave him a long, searching look and then walked away. Julian stood frozen, a knot of regret and anxiety tightening in his stomach. He had thought that exposing the truth would bring Chloe back to him, but he had never imagined it would turn out like this. Looking at Julian, the suspicion in Chloe's heart grew. His behavior was strange. She thought for a moment, then sent a text to her assistant. I want you to investigate Julian Vance as well. Find out why he was digging into this. In the car, Chloe frowned. Something felt off. The car was too quiet. She tried to place the feeling, and then it hit her. The familiar scent of jasmine was gone. She asked the driver, her voice sharp, why was the air freshener in the car changed? The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Ms. Sterling, the old one was a custom blend that Mr. Miller made himself. He said it was calming. He just hasn't given me a new one recently. Chloe froze. A series of images flashed through her mind. Coming home late from work to find the entryway light on and a glass of warm honey water waiting for her. The special porridge he made when her stomach was upset, with just a hint of yam to make it soothing but not too sweet. The small jasmine sachet he would slip into her purse on rainy days, saying it would ward off the damp chill. All those small, gentle gestures she had barely even noticed at the time now felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing her heart. The atmosphere in the Miller family's mansion was thick with tension. Nathan pointed to his own bruises, his voice seething with anger. That idiot. He lived like a dog under my name. He's completely useless. It's an insult to me. His mother hugged him, her voice full of pity. Don't be angry, dear. We'll make them pay. Nathan scoffed. Avenge me? Our family is a shadow of what it once was. And after paying him $30 million, how are we supposed to fight the Sterlings? Hearing this, his parents' faces went pale. Nathan was right. The Miller family had been in decline for years. They were just good at keeping up appearances. They were in no position to challenge the Sterlings. Just then, the butler announced that Chloe Sterling and Julian Vance had arrived. The Millers exchanged a look and stormed into the foyer, their eyes immediately landing on Julian. Mrs. Miller's voice was shrill as she pointed a finger at him. It was this bastard who hurt my son, and you have the audacity to bring him here? Do you think the Miller family is a joke? She started to lunge at him. Chloe held up a hand to stop her, her voice cold. I'm here to ask you some questions. Mr. Miller scoffed, but knowing the power the Sterlings wielded, he stepped aside. Come in. The atmosphere in the study was tense. Chloe got straight to the point. Where is the real Nathan Miller? The Millers' faces paled. They exchanged a look. Then Mr. Miller said, trying to sound calm, Chloe, what are you talking about? Our son, Nathan, is the one who has been living with you. Chloe let out a cold laugh and threw the file from her jacket onto the desk. Really? Did you think you could hide the substitute marriage from 3 years ago forever? Mrs. Miller's hands began to tremble. She opened her mouth to argue, but the study door was suddenly pushed open. A low voice spoke from the doorway. I am Nathan Miller. What about it? Chloe turned to see Nathan standing in the doorway, holding up a driver's license. The name on it clearly read, Nathan Miller. Chloe stared at the ID, her brow furrowed. The photo was a perfect match, but her gut told her something was still wrong. If you doubt my identity, feel free to run a check, he said coolly, then turned to leave. Chloe grabbed his wrist, her voice sharp. Who are you? It doesn't matter. There was never any room for Nathan Miller in your heart anyway. The words were like a knife to her chest. Her grip loosened, and Nathan walked away without a backward glance. That night, her assistant called, his voice tense. Ms. Sterling, I've confirmed it. The Millers have 2 sons. Twins. The one you married 3 years ago was the younger brother, Ethan. The older brother, Nathan, fled the country to avoid the wedding, so the family had Ethan take his place. For some reason, Nathan has recently returned. Chloe gripped her phone, her knuckles turning white. So that was it. The man who had cooked for her, who had left the light on for her, who had silently endured all her cruelty, had never been Nathan. It had been Ethan. She shot to her feet, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. Get some men. Go to the Miller estate and bring me his parents. The Millers were forced into chairs by her bodyguards, their faces pale with fear. Chloe stood before them, her eyes like chips of ice. She gritted her teeth, her voice low and dangerous. Where is Ethan? Mrs. Miller's lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak. That boy took the money and left. $30 million. He was always a difficult child. Now he thinks he's too good for his own parents. Chloe slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. Shut up. You have no right to speak about my husband. Just then, her assistant hurried in and handed her a file. Ms. Sterling, I have the information you requested. Chloe opened the file. With every page she turned, her face grew darker. Ethan had been sent to the countryside at birth. In over 20 years, his parents had never once visited him or even sent money for his upkeep. He had survived on his grandparents' meager savings. At age 5, when he had a 104-degree fever, his grandmother had called the Millers for help, and his mother had hung up on her. The doctor said that 10 more minutes and he would have died. While Nathan had lavish birthday parties every year, Ethan didn't even own a proper winter coat. Chloe's voice was dangerously quiet. She threw the file in their faces. How could any parents be so monstrous? The papers cut Mr. Miller's cheek, but he still tried to defend himself. We gave him life. Isn't that enough? Raised him? Until he was 18. Every piece of clothing Ethan owned was a hand-me-down from your neighbors. What was he to you? Just a tool to be used. Chloe's voice was like steel. She turned to her bodyguards. Take them to the cellar. Take good care of them. Let them out when they're ready to tell me the truth. Mrs. Miller shrieked. Chloe, you wouldn't dare. We're his parents. Chloe let out a cold, humorless laugh. Now you remember you're his parents? As the bodyguards were dragging them away, the door burst open. Nathan stormed in, his face white with rage. Chloe, are you insane? Let my parents go. Chloe looked at him, her eyes cold. So you're finally done pretending. Nathan froze, then began to scream hysterically. So what if I am? That worthless piece of trash never should have married you. He's just some hick from the countryside. What right did he have? The sharp crack of a slap echoed through the room. Nathan stumbled backward, clutching his cheek in disbelief. Chloe's eyes were dark with contempt. That was for your brother. Your whole family is disgusting. Nathan suddenly began to laugh, a wild, unhinged sound. Chloe, don't you dare pretend you care about him now. How did you treat him for the last 3 years? You made him sleep in the guest room. You brought another man into his home. You threw him into a frozen lake for Julian Vance. He narrowed his eyes, his voice dripping with venom. Stop pretending. You think you love my brother? You didn't even notice he was gone. You don't know the first thing about him. Chloe's breath caught in her throat, his words hitting her like a physical blow. Her voice was a raw whisper. Where is he? Nathan wiped the blood from his mouth and smiled. You'll never find him. She turned away from him, her voice weary and cold. Get out. I never want to see you again. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Ms. Sterling, I have a lead. A man matching his description bought a plane ticket to Charleston 2 weeks ago. Chloe's pupils contracted. Book me on the next flight out. Miles away, I stood on a beach in Charleston, the salty air kissing my face, lifting strands of my hair. The setting sun painted the ocean in shades of orange and red. Waves rolled onto the shore and then retreated. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, savoring a peace I hadn't felt in years. A gentle voice came from behind me. Ethan. I turned to see a petite woman standing nearby, holding a bag of fresh seafood. I'm Sarah Jennings, she said. I live next door. I heard you just moved in, so I brought you some seafood. A welcome to the neighborhood gift. I was a little surprised, but I smiled politely. Thank you, but you don't have to do that. She held out the bag, her tone easy and natural. Don't be silly. Charleston has the best seafood. You're new here, you should try some of the local flavor. Her friendliness was so genuine and unassuming that it was impossible to refuse. I hesitated for a moment, then took the bag. Well, thank you. Sarah smiled, her eyes glancing at the boxes behind me. Need a hand with any of that? No, I'm almost finished, but thank you. All right, well, let me know if you need anything. She nodded and walked away. I watched her walk away, a little lost in thought. She was the first person to speak to me since I'd arrived in Charleston. Over the next few weeks, I settled into life in the small coastal town. I opened a small coffee shop by the beach. I made coffee, I read books. My days were quiet and full. Sometimes I would sit outside the shop and just stare out at the ocean, letting my thoughts drift. Sarah would stop by for coffee sometimes. She never tried to force a conversation, just a simple hello, and then she would pay and leave. Until one evening, when a sudden thunderstorm rolled in. I was getting ready to close up shop when the first fat drops of rain began to fall. I stood under the awning, watching the downpour intensify, a small frown on my face. A familiar voice came from behind me. Forgot your umbrella? I turned to see Sarah standing in the rain, holding a large, clear umbrella. I'll walk you home, she said. I started to refuse, but the rain was coming down in sheets. I finally just nodded. Thank you. When we got to my door, I hesitated for a moment, then asked, Would you like to come in for some tea? Sarah looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Okay. After that night, something shifted between us. Sarah started stopping by the coffee shop to help out sometimes, and I would bring her dinner when I knew she was working late. She never asked about my past, and I never offered to tell her. Until one day, I was sorting coffee beans and cut my finger on the edge of a bag. The moment I saw the bead of blood well up on my skin, I froze. I was suddenly back at that frozen lake, seeing the cold, empty look in Chloe's eyes. My hand began to tremble. Sarah's voice cut through the memory. What's wrong? I snapped back to the present and shook my head. Nothing. I just cut myself. She frowned, took my hand, and examined the cut. That looks deep. You need to clean it. Her touch was warm and gentle, but firm. I stared at her, a strange warmth spreading through my chest, my eyes beginning to burn. A bittersweet feeling I couldn't name washed over me. It had been so long since anyone had shown me such simple kindness. As night fell, a bonfire was lit on the beach. A crowd gathered, singing and dancing, their laughter mingling with the sound of the waves. I sat on the sand a little ways away, just watching. Sarah came and sat beside me, handing me a cup of hot chocolate. Not joining in? I took the cup and smiled. I'm more of a spectator. She didn't say anything, just sat with me in comfortable silence. After a while, she said, Ethan. I turned to look at her. She met my gaze, her expression serious. You deserve to be happy. Don't let your past hold you back. I was stunned. The sea breeze stirred her hair, and the firelight danced on her face, her expression both gentle and resolute. I looked down at the sand and nodded. Maybe I thought I could really start to move on. Chloe stood on a street corner in Charleston, the salty ocean air whipping around her. She stared out at the unfamiliar, bustling city, her eyes cold and weary. It had been a month. She had searched every corner of Charleston, but there was still no sign of me. The lead had been a dead end. He'd bought a ticket here, but in a city the size, he could be anywhere. Days of fruitless searching had left her exhausted, her eyes bloodshot. She checked her watch. 9 p.m. The streets were starting to empty. She walked aimlessly, her eyes scanning every person she passed, terrified she might miss him. Suddenly, she stopped. A little way ahead, a man was standing under a streetlight. His tall frame, the way he stood, it was unmistakably him. Her heart seized in her chest, her blood roaring in her ears. She ran, her movements purely instinctual, and grabbed his wrist, her voice a hoarse, desperate cry. Ethan! The man jumped, startled, and spun around. It was a stranger's face. He shook her hand off, taking a step back. Who are you? Chloe stood frozen, the hope that had flared in her eyes instantly extinguished. Chloe looked out at the passing crowd and let out a bitter, hoarse laugh. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Keep looking. I don't care if you have to tear this city apart. Find him. She hung up and looked up at the night sky, her expression a mixture of obsession and despair. Ethan, where are you? The morning sun filtered through the white linen curtains. I opened the window, and the humid, salty air of the ocean washed over me. I took a deep breath, a small smile playing on my lips. I'd used part of the money to buy this small inn, a 3-story building right on the ocean. A group of college students staying for the summer waved to me from the patio below. Ethan, breakfast smells amazing today. I smiled. There's more in the kitchen if you're still hungry. I turned and headed downstairs. As I stepped into the courtyard, I saw Sarah walking towards me with a bag of fresh fish. She held it up with a warm smile. Fresh from the docks this morning. I'll make you some soup for lunch. Over the last few months, Sarah had become a fixture in my life. She was like a ray of light in my dark world. I had spent my entire life living in someone else's shadow, a ghost with no thoughts or desires of my own. She was the one who made me realize that I mattered, that I had the right to want things for myself. That evening, another storm rolled in. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a frantic knocking at the door over the sound of the thunder. I opened the door to find Sarah standing on the porch, soaked to the bone, clutching something to her chest. I quickly stepped aside. Come in, you're soaked. She hurried inside and carefully opened her jacket. A tiny, shivering white kitten was curled up inside. I found him in the alley, she said, her voice soft with pity. He was about to be washed away. I'll get a hairdryer, I said, turning to go, but Sarah grabbed my wrist. Your hair is wet too. We were standing very close. I could smell the rain on her clothes, mixed with the faint, clean scent of jasmine. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively took a small step back. Sarah pulled her hand back and cleared her throat. We should take care of the kitten first. I looked down, the tips of my ears burning. I sat on the living room floor, watching the kitten sleep, its tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Sarah came over with 2 mugs of warm milk and handed one to me. Still up, I took the mug. I'll stay with him a little longer. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Ethan, if you ever decided you were ready to start a new relationship, what kind of person would you be looking for? I froze and turned to look at her. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated the side of her face. She was smiling, and the look in her eyes was open and full of affection. My heart began to beat faster. I quickly looked away. I haven't really thought about it. Sarah just smiled and didn't push it. We sat in silence. The only sound in the room, the soft purr of the kitten. I was crouched in a corner of the courtyard, feeding a small piece of fish to the little white kitten. I couldn't help but smile. I heard footsteps behind me and assumed it was Sarah. Without turning, I asked, Sarah, don't you think he's put on a little weight? There was no answer, only the sound of the wind in the trees. I frowned and turned around. It was Chloe. I froze. Her voice was hoarse and trembling, but unmistakable. I finally found you. My breath caught in my throat. I quickly composed myself, my voice turning to ice. What are you doing here? Ethan, do you have any idea how long I've been looking for you? I've searched all of Charleston. I even sent people to look for you overseas. How could you just disappear? Chloe Sterling, I said, my voice flat and emotionless. Please leave. Her voice rose, cracking with an uncontrolled anger. No, why did you just leave without a word? Do you have any idea what I... She didn't finish her sentence. A figure suddenly appeared at her side and slapped her hard across the face. Chloe staggered back, stunned. Sarah stood in front of me, her eyes sharp as daggers, her voice a low, clear warning. Stay away from him, or I'm calling the police. Chloe wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth. She looked from Sarah's furious face to mine. My expression was calm, impassive, as if I were merely an observer. Chloe let out a cold laugh, her eyes a storm of conflicting emotions. I see. You left me for her. I stood up and brushed the non-existent dust from my pants, my voice cool and distant. Chloe, you give yourself too much credit. I didn't leave you for anyone. Her pupils contracted, and she looked as if she'd been punched in the gut, the air knocked from her lungs. Then why did you leave? There was never an us. I cut her off. There was nothing between us. I finally met her gaze, my own eyes like ice. Have you forgotten, Chloe? I stayed with you for 3 years for money and my freedom. The transaction is complete. We're even. Her voice was a low hiss, each word ground out between her teeth. Even? Ethan, do you really think we could ever be even? I let out a small, cold laugh. Did you really think I was in love with you? The color drained from her face, as if I'd physically stabbed her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. It was true. I had never once said I loved her. Even when she had hurt me time and time again, I had just endured it silently, never showing that it affected me. And somehow, ridiculously, she had mistaken my endurance for love. Sarah took my arm, her voice gentle. Ethan, let's go. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on Chloe, wary and protective. I nodded and we turned to leave. Wait! Chloe lunged for my arm, but Sarah blocked her. Her voice was cold. Ms. Sterling, please, have some dignity. Chloe's eyes were dark with a terrifying rage. Who the hell do you think you are? This has nothing to do with you. I finally turned back to face her, my voice laced with sarcasm. Chloe, have you forgotten? Your dear Julian is waiting for you back home. She practically screamed the words. There's nothing between us. It was all a misunderstanding. I can explain. I cut her off, my voice dangerously quiet. Whatever is going on between you and him has nothing to do with me. I paused, my gaze turning to ice. Chloe, I'm going to say this one last time. I was never in love with you. The words were like a knife, twisting in her heart. Her breath hitched, and she looked as if she'd been plunged into ice water. I didn't give her another glance. I turned and walked away, side by side with Sarah, my back straight and unyielding, as if she and I were complete strangers. Chloe stood frozen, watching until we had disappeared from sight, her chest a raging storm of pain and fury. She couldn't believe it. She wouldn't believe that I had never loved her, that all the tenderness, all the sacrifices, had been a lie. She screamed after my retreating figure, her voice a raw, broken sound. Ethan, you think this is over? I'm telling you, it's not. I didn't slow my pace. I didn't even turn my head. Chloe slammed her fist into the trunk of a nearby tree, her knuckles splitting open. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. She stared in the direction I had gone, her eyes dark with a desperate, obsessive fire. I'm not letting you go, she thought. I will never let you go. Chloe stood in the courtyard, staring in the direction I had disappeared, her heart a maelstrom of regret and a violent rage she had never known before. Her assistant hurried over, his face grim, a file in his hand. Ms. Sterling, I have the information. Chloe slowly tore her gaze away, her voice like ice. What is it? The assistant hesitated, then handed her the file. It's a record of everything Mr. Vance has done to Ethan over the years. Chloe snatched the file and tore it open. Inside was a collection of photos, security camera stills, and audio files. She flipped through the first few pages, her pupils contracting in horror. A photo of Julian at the top of the stairs, deliberately pouring water on the steps when no one was looking. A security video of him switching my medication with laxatives when he thought I wasn't looking. And an audio file of his voice. That idiot. All I have to do is pretend to be hurt, and Chloe believes every word. He deserves everything he gets. Chloe's hand clenched, crumpling the papers into a ball. Her breathing grew heavy, her eyes a raging storm. The assistant swallowed hard and handed her another report. There's more. When you had Ethan locked in the cellar, Mr. Vance had someone release a bag of rats in there with him. A vein throbbed in Chloe's temple, her mind reeling as if something inside her had shattered. She remembered that day. He had been locked in the cellar all night. When he came out the next morning, he was pale and shaking. She had thought he was being dramatic. She had even sneered at him. It was only one night. Did you have to make such a scene? But he had told her. He had said, Julian let rats in here. And she hadn't believed him. Chloe's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. A white-hot rage unlike anything she had ever felt consuming her. She threw the files to the ground, her voice a raw, terrifying sound. Where is Julian Vance right now? The assistant, terrified by the look in her eyes, took a step back. He's at the Sterling estate. Chloe turned and strode away, moving so fast she was almost running. Back at the Sterling estate, Julian Vance was lounging on the sofa, playing a video game and humming to himself. He'd just gotten word that Chloe had gone to Charleston to find Ethan. He wasn't happy about it, but he was confident that Ethan's stubborn pride would never allow him to forgive her. All he had to do was add a little more fuel to the fire, and Chloe would eventually give up on him for good. Just as he was congratulating himself, the front door of the mansion was kicked open. Julian jumped, startled. He looked up to see Chloe striding towards him, her face a mask of cold fury. His heart seized, but he quickly arranged his features into a look of wounded concern. Chloe, what's wrong? Before he could finish the sentence, she slapped him, hard, across the face. Her voice was like ice. Julian Vance, you are a piece of work. Julian stared at her, stunned. Chloe, what are you doing? She looked at him as if he were something she'd scraped off her shoe. Take him to the cellar, she said to her bodyguards. The bodyguards immediately seized him and began to drag him towards the cellar. Julian finally began to panic, struggling against their grip. Chloe, are you insane? You can't do this to me. Have you forgotten who's been by your side all this time? Have you forgotten that Ethan never loved you? Her eyes grew even colder. Listen to me, Julian. From this day forward, I am going to make your life a living hell. She turned to her bodyguards. And put a bag of rats in there with him. Let him enjoy the company. The color drained from Julian's face. No, Chloe, you can't do this to me. His screams were cut off by the heavy cellar door. Chloe stood before it, her expression dark and grim. Her hatred for him now was as vast and bottomless as her previous affection had been. But even more than that, she hated herself. The snow came to Charleston without warning. Chloe stood outside my inn, a fine dusting of white on her black coat. Her fingertips were red with cold, but she still clutched the file in her hand. She stared at the closed door, took a deep breath, and knocked. The door opened. I stood there, my expression unchanging when I saw her. Can I help you? Her breath caught in her throat. She had thought there would be so much to say when she saw me again, but in this moment, she found her throat was tight, the words refusing to come. She held the file out to me, her voice thin. I was hoping you would look at this. My eyes flickered to the file, but I didn't take it. What is it? Her fingertips trembled. It's everything Julian did to you. I only just found out. He was setting you up the entire time. This is the proof. I listened without a flicker of surprise, then calmly looked away. I don't care about any of that anymore. Her heart sank. She had expected anger, accusations, questions about why it had taken her so long. But all I offered was a dismissive, I don't care. She added quickly, as if desperate to prove something, I've already punished him. And your parents, I cut her off, my gaze cold. Chloe, why are you still trying to blame everyone else? She froze. I looked directly at her, my voice quiet, but every word was a blade. Are you completely blameless in this? When Julian did all those things to me, did you not stand by and let it happen? Her breath caught, her heart clenching as if in a vice. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words died on her lips. What right did she have to blame it all on Julian? She was the one who had chosen to believe him time and time again. She was the one who had ignored my pain. She was the one who, when I needed her most, had pushed me into the abyss herself. Her voice was a low, hoarse whisper, laced with a raw, ragged shame. I'm sorry. I shook my head, a faint, humorless smile touching my lips. Don't apologize. It's pointless now. I'm married. She looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. A roaring filled her ears, as if her entire world was collapsing. Her voice was a shattered wreck. You're with who? I didn't answer. I just glanced past her, toward the door. Chloe followed my gaze. Sarah was standing a short distance away, holding a bag of groceries, her expression cool as she looked in our direction. In that instant, the blood seemed to freeze in Chloe's veins. My voice was calm, almost cruel. Chloe, we're finished. Don't come here again. With that, I walked over to Sarah, my back to Chloe, resolute and final. Chloe stood frozen, watching as I disappeared into the falling snow. An agonizing hollowness opened up in her chest, so painful she could barely breathe. She knew this time she had truly lost me for good. The snow was falling harder now. Chloe didn't remember walking back to her car. She sat in the driver's seat, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. The swirling snow blurred the world outside, a perfect reflection of the chaos in her mind. She remembered the first time she saw me, standing quietly in the miller's living room like a marionette waiting for its strings to be pulled. She remembered the porridge I'd made, the light I'd always left on, all the humiliation I had endured for her sake. She remembered the final look in my eyes, calm, detached, as if she were nothing more than a stranger. It felt like a dull knife was slowly, methodically carving up her heart, the pain stealing her breath. She slammed her fist on the steering wheel. The horn blared, a raw, piercing sound that shattered the silence of the snowy night. Ethan, she whispered my name, her voice a raw, broken thing. But this time, there was no one left to answer. Some mistakes take a lifetime to atone for.